Joining our panel tonight, Ohio Republican Senator Rob Portman in our center seat. Senator, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You gave a speech today about poverty. You are in a growing list of Republicans who have felt that they needed to get out on this issue. Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio, others. What is the message?
Well, first of all, we're in the 50th anniversary of the war on poverty, and things are worse, not better. In fact, poverty has increased during the last 4 years rather than improving. And so part of the message I gave today was, one, Republicans and all Americans ought to be focused on this issue. And second, that we actually have some policies that have worked. We ought to build on those. I called it constructive conservatism, in the sense that we know what works in terms of dealing with drug abuse and drug addiction. I've been involved in that for 20 years. We know what works in terms of prisoner reentry, dealing with this terrible cycle of recidivism where people get out of prison and within a few years they're back in again. Huge cost to the taxpayers, obviously helping to increase poverty and so many more broken families and broken communities because of it. So we talked about that and talked about the fact that, you know, there are proven policies that work, and Republicans ought to be behind those and promoting them.
Jason?
Democrats between now and November would probably rather talk about anything other than Obamacare and the economy. Mm-hmm. So my question is, are you doing Republicans any favors by changing the subject, and not only changing the subject, changing it to something, poverty, income inequality, that has traditionally been right in the wheelhouse of Democrats?
No, I think everybody cares about it and should, and I don't know if it's good or bad for the Republican Party, but it's good for the country for us to have an honest discussion about this. And you're right, income inequality has gotten a lot of discussion. What's gotten very little discussion is upward mobility. You know, why is there this persistent poverty? Why do we see 47 million Americans now below poverty? Why do we see among people who are in deep poverty probably historic numbers for our country? And part of the reason is so many of the programs that, you know, are well-intentioned here from Washington don't work. But there are better approaches, and the approaches I laid out today are approaches that take into account the fact that it's got to be bottom-up, not top-down. Ensure that those programs are in fact tested, that we use, you know, evidence-based research to determine what's the best way to do it, and require results and performance. And I talked about some very specific examples where if we don't deal with some of these issues, we're not going to get at some of the causes of poverty.
You also talked about drug addiction and incarceration. Mm-hmm. And the White House has also been talking about these issues in terms of sentencing policies, particularly with how they relate to drug offenses. And they have some allies in your colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle, in Rand Paul and Mike Lee and some others, who have said they're overly harsh. And some even call for moving in the direction of some states like Colorado with drug legalization. Where do you come down on that?
Well, I do think some sentencing reform is appropriate, but as I talked about today, I wish the President would join with us and deal with these issues in a more holistic way. Instead of just saying we're going to allow people to leave the prison system because they are nonviolent drug offenders, let's ensure that we do use some of these techniques and policies we talked about today. Diversion, where you get people who have a substance abuse problem to go into treatment with the alternative of incarceration. Drug courts, which work very well. So instead of simply saying we're going to have broad clemency and let a lot of people out of the prison system who are likely to be right back in it, you know, the data shows that 2/3 of those folks are likely to be back in the prison system within 2 or 3 years. Let's put in place policies that we know work, including the Second Chance Act, which I was the author of, that actually helps get people the treatment they need and also the job skills that they need to become productive members of society. So I think that's the better solution.
Senator, you had a non-controversial bill, bipartisan, that fell apart yesterday in a procedural squabble, the likes of which we've seen many times. Republicans have complained that the majority leader has shut them out of legislating. If the Republicans are in charge next year, what should they do to stay in charge, to keep their majority, and to help the Senate legislate again?
Look, I think we should open up the process and allow the people's voices to be heard. I did have a bill that I worked on for 3 years that I'd hoped could get through the process. It got out of committee. It was a strong bipartisan vote. It had co-sponsors from both sides of the aisle. It made a lot of sense. It was on energy. What we were asking for was to have a few amendments, 4 or 5 amendments that were energy related, to be debated as part of that bill.
Including Keystone.
Including Keystone Pipeline, which is something that, you know, most Americans think we ought to approve. I certainly think it's long overdue to have that approved. So we'd hoped for a good debate on energy issues, including energy efficiency, which was the core of the bill, and a good common sense bill that says the least expensive energy is actually the energy that we don't use, that we can save. But we were not able to do so because this town has become so dysfunctional that we aren't even allowed to have a debate on energy issues when we're debating an energy bill. So I hope that we can still get back to that. But when Republicans...
So you would want open amendment process under a Republican majority?
Look, I think you said to be able to keep the majority. I don't know what's the best thing to do politically. I think Democrats have determined that it's better not to allow votes on amendments because it makes their members vote on tough issues. My view is that that's what we're hired to do, and the American people expect that. And if the American people knew the fact that there have only been something like 8 Republicans amendments voted on since July, I think they'd be shocked.
Chuck.
So I think we should open up the process more.
I wanted to go back quickly to the things you were talking about with Jason, specifically poverty, inequality, mobility. As you're well aware, the President is campaigning hard for an increase in the minimum wage. So far, the Senate has not been able to come to terms on that issue. There's been talk of some sort of a compromise. First of all, where do you stand on the importance of that within the broader picture of dealing with income inequality? And secondly, what would you like to see, what do you think could be done in the Senate to come out with a compromise on that issue?
Well, I don't like what the President's proposed. It's 10-10. I think it's too high and too fast, and I think it will result in just the opposite of what he apparently hopes for, which is more jobs. I hope that's what he's trying to do, because all the studies show, including from the Congressional Budget Office, that by raising it that high and that fast, you're going to result in fewer jobs being created. CBO says we lose 500,000 jobs. Other studies have different numbers, but pretty much all of them come down to the point that right now, because half the people on minimum wage are young people between 16 and 24, and because for many of them it's getting on that first rung of the economic ladder, that if you increase it too fast and too high, you're going to result in fewer jobs, not more jobs. And so for the very people who were trying to get into the workforce, dealing with not just high unemployment numbers, but as you know, Chuck, very high numbers of people who have dropped out of the workforce altogether, really at historic levels for men back to the 1940s, men and women combined back to the 1970s. We should be putting out policies that add jobs, not to put more pressure on employers to reduce jobs.
So you're for the minimum wage increase at some level?
Look, I support Ohio's minimum wage, which happens to be about 10% higher than the federal, and it's indexed to inflation. I actually think it should be indexed to inflation. I think this has become sort of a political exercise every 5 or 10 years, where people come to Congress and it's sort of a stair-step thing. And frankly, because of that, the economics of it are much more difficult for employers, because the Democrats come and say, let's raise it dramatically over a relatively short period of time, rather than saying, as we do in Ohio, let's put it to index it to inflation. Right now we're at 7.95. We'll go up slowly. I think that's a much better approach.
Well, if I have another second on this, I want to ask you about the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit. Bret had a point on his program earlier about once again, it's been shown to be somewhat inaccurate, 10 or 12 billion or 13 billion this year in missed payments. At the same time, it's thought to be one of the best instruments the federal government has for reducing poverty. I didn't see it in your speech, but I wonder if you think that's got to be, that's a program, since it was started under President Ford, that Republicans can get behind, where there might be some bipartisan, expanding the EITC, there might be some bipartisan agreement.
Yes, and EITC is a much better approach because it actually deals with people who are working, encourages work, rather than telling employers you've got to pay a certain wage and that'll result in fewer jobs based on the studies. So I do think the EITC is a better approach. The missed payment is also a major issue, though, and if you look at it over the last 10 years, probably 120 billion missed payment. The missed payment rate's probably 20 to 25% versus 3 or 4% for other programs that deal with folks in poverty. So that is an issue. I think there are ways to deal with it. I did talk about that today at AEI, and my proposal was you have an offset of your payroll taxes, so it's done at the employer rather than at the IRS, which I think would make a big difference. But no, I think EITC is a good program. I think the Work Opportunity Tax Credit's a good program, where you're encouraging companies to hire people, whether it's veterans or people who are long-term unemployed, other people who have issues because they have been in and out of the criminal justice system. I think that's a good program, but that leads to employment. And I think that's got to be the key right now, getting more people to work.
More with the panel and Senator Portman. We'll talk foreign policy and politics, of course, after a quick break.
This program is brought to you by AARP, Real Possibilities.
If you don't think Feed the Hungry when you think AARP, then you don't know ARP. Our Drive to End Hunger has donated 29 million meals and counting. Find more Real Possibilities at aarp.org/possibilities.
Right now at Joseph A. Bank, buy almost any sport coat, get a second free, plus 2 pairs of pants free.
That's 2 sport coats plus 2 pants for the price of 1 sport coat. Only at Joseph A. Bank.
Nobody ever stomped their foot and asked for less. Because what we all really want is more. There's a reason it's called an all-you-can-eat buffet and not a have just a little buffet. That's the idea behind the More Everything plan. It's more of everything you want for less. And now get $100 off any smartphone, like the HTC One ME. Get more with our best plans on the best network. For best results, use Verizon.
Where in the world is your security software developed? PCMatic's competition believes that foreign countries can develop better security software, or at least less expensive than the United States. None of this is true. PCMatic is developed in the United States of America. PCMatic eliminates freezing and blue screens. PCMatic blocks annoying adware that hijacks online shopping. PCMatic closes holes in software like Java and Flash. PCMatic blocks viruses that none of the others can. PCMatic keeps your computers running at optimal speed, even after years of use. And PCMatic is just $50 for 5 computers for 1 year. PCMatic is backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you need help, PCMatic's technical and customer support are Americans whose first language is English. Dump your foreign-made security software and get PCMatic, made and supported in the USA. Go to PCMatic.com. That's PCMatic.com.
We broke up.
We broke up.
We broke up.
With online dating.
If online dating is turning you off, we'll turn you on to a smarter way of dating. Introducing It's Just Lunch, the world's #1 personalized matchmaking service for professional singles.
Instead of spending hours and hours online, it made it fun for me because professionals are doing the work for me.
Our matchmakers do what no website can. We get to know you and personally hand select your matches.
Getting to know my clients is the most important part of what we do and why we're so successful.
It's almost like a friend calling you and saying, hey, I have this perfect girl for you. And that's exactly what I got in Just Lunch.
It's Just Lunch guarantees you will go out on dates, and we'll handle all the details, from scheduling your date to confirming the reservation. Whether it's just lunch or drinks after work, we're bringing a more successful way of dating to the table. Call us today and find out what our professional matchmakers can do for you. Leave nothing to chance and everything to It's Just Lunch.
We're back with our center seat panel and Senator Rob Portman. Senator, just this past week, Mitt Romney was asked about who he thinks should run for president, who he would support, and you are on his list, Rob Portman.
A long list.
A long list? Are you going to run?
I'm planning to run for re-election. I'm up the same year, 2016. So at this point, I plan to run for re-election in my great state of Ohio.
You were the debate partner where you played Joe Biden. Obviously, you got a lot of respect from the Romney campaign, but will you consider it? I mean, are you going to make that decision at some point?
I've played Obama, and I've also played various other folks on the Democratic side. I don't know why they keep coming to me, you know, and I've enjoyed that. And playing that role for Mitt Romney was good because you get to hear what the other side's actually thinking and doing and saying. And I think sometimes we Republicans, and probably the Democrats do the same thing, aren't listening. And I think it's important to hear what the other side's saying so that you can better rebut what they're saying and be able to, you know, offer an alternative. But no, I'm planning to stay in the Senate, continue to do the best I can to try to spread this message about economic growth, and then, as I said, the folks who are going to fall behind and through the cracks even when you have economic growth. And what do we do, not just as Republicans, but as a country to deal with that?
Maybe.
Senator, Democrats believe, and some Republicans are starting to believe, that a comprehensive immigration reform with a legalization component and some kind of openness or support for same-sex marriage are gateway issues to many voters in this country, and that until and unless a Republican nominee shifts on one or both, they are hindering their path to building a national coalition for the White House. Do you believe that that's true?
Look, I think there are a lot of issues out there. I think as you know, I've been very involved in the same-sex marriage issue over the last year, and I do think among young people it's a critical issue. Not just young people, but I think in order to sort of break through and talk about the other issues that every young person should care about.
Right.
The impact of Obamacare, which is particularly pernicious for young people, the debt and deficit, the weak economy, and the lack of a job when they get out of school. Sometimes have to break through on some of these other issues, and one is showing some respect on the same-sex marriage issue. So I do think there's some truth to that. And I think our party is beginning to change on all these issues. Maybe not, in the sense of the platform changing, certainly, but I do think that there is more respect being shown, and I think there's a bigger tent approach, and I think that's appropriate.
Can a candidate win in 16 or 20 without shifting on one or both of those?
We'll see. Candidates win in this country because independent voters think that they'd be better to lead than the other person. And that's true in my state of Ohio, and it's true nationally. And I think the two issues you mentioned are very important to many people out there who are, particularly, as you say, young people, and maybe the Hispanic community, particularly on those issues. But there's so many issues, such a broad range. I think people look at the totality of the candidate, whether that candidate has an agenda that is compassionate, that's understanding of what the real problems are out there. We talked about that earlier today, dealing with this pernicious poverty, which has gotten worse, not better, and whether they have a growth message. The top issue will always be jobs and the economy, I believe.
I want to get to foreign policy, Jason.
Are you satisfied with the Obama administration's response to the kidnappings of the Nigerian schoolgirls, or should we be doing more than tweeting our outrage? Should we be sending in special forces? What say you?
I'm pleased that they have sent in some American assets, including monitoring assets. As you may know, I started the Human Trafficking Caucus in the Senate, and I've been involved in this issue, and I talked about it today at the speech we talked about. I do think that it's good that they've taken some steps. I would be more aggressive, but I applaud them for what they have done. And it also has helped raise awareness of this issue generally. Sex trafficking doesn't just occur in Nigeria or just in Asia. It occurs right here in this country.
The Select Committee for Benghazi, should the Senate play a role, or
Yes.
do you think that the House can handle this?
No, the Senate should play a role. We should have our own Select Committee. I would prefer it to be bicameral, in other words, have a House and Senate committee working together. I think you've got to get to the bottom of this issue, and I think, frankly, it's in the administration's interest to do that more quickly rather than having it be even closer to a 2016 election, because I think the American people are looking for and deserve answers. And, 4 Americans were left behind, and, we have all kinds of different theories as to why the administration did not say that it was a terrorist attack. We need to find out why and what happened. And then finally, and this is something that I think sometimes we miss, Jason, is the next day the president went out to the Rose Garden and said these people will be brought to justice who committed these terrorist attacks, as he says, although it was talked about terrorism generally. If that's the case, what's happened? Have any of those individuals been brought to justice? The answer is no.
Senator, thank you very much for being on center seat. We'd love to have you back sometime. That's it for the panel, but stay tuned to see this. An age-old answer to an age-old question, and it involves Senator Portman.
When folks think about what they get from Alaska, they think salmon and energy. But the energy BP produces up here creates something else as well. Jobs all over America. Engineering and innovation jobs, advanced safety systems and technology, shipping and manufacturing. Across the United States, BP supports more than 250,000 jobs. When we set up operation in one part of the country, people in other parts go to work. That's not a coincidence. It's one more part of our commitment to America.
Don't just treat gas, attack it. New Phazon 250 milligram, the strongest anti-gas medicine available for fast gas relief.
At Golden Corral, we love seniors. Right now, our senior early bird special is just $7.49, drink included. Choose from all the delicious Golden Corral food you love. Drink included for just $7.49. It's the early bird special. It's just for seniors, and it's only at Golden Corral.
Hi, I'm William Devane. See this number? This is the amount of debt our nation has dug itself into. Shocking. And it goes up millions every minute of every day. And if you're not worried, you should be. Now, how do you get some control over your investments in retirement with this hanging over your head? Buy gold and silver from Roslyn Capital. Gold and silver are the only forms of currency that make me feel secure, something that paper money can't do. Roslyn will beat any price of any coin at any time. Just call them. And Roslyn ships my gold in 10 days or less, faster than anyone else. So take a good look. That's the debt clock. And this is your wake-up call. Buy gold and silver from Roslyn Capital. What's in your safe?
Call now to get a free gold kit and a free IRA transfer kit. And with a minimum order, get a free safe to store your gold. Call 800-370-8200. 800-370-8200. 800-370-8200.
What can you get when you go to Vonage.com for home phone service? Unlimited nationwide calling for $14.99 a month for a full 6 months?
You betcha.
How about calling from both your home and mobile phone?
Sure, pal.
Plus upgrade to Vonage World for just $2 more a month?
Certainly, y'all.
Go to Vonage.com or call 877-4VONAGE.
You again. Gorilla Glue. Of course.
Water activated, original Gorilla Glue expands into the materials to form an incredibly strong bond for the toughest jobs on planet Earth.
Scientists have been researching why many Okinawans stay so active as they age.
この人たち何年も研究してるね。
まだわからないなんて信じられる？
But Okinawans know one reason. They eat well to be well. Okinawa Life has isoflavin, a key ingredient of the Okinawa diet. A secret of vitality from people who really know how to live.
Okinawa Life.
Finally, tonight we try in these center seat panels to find a kicker here involving our guest. Well, we had to dig for this one. A financial question on CNBC and an analogy about which came first, the chicken or the egg, and an interesting impression from the senator from Ohio.
Who is the authority on this issue, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, a lot of people now are on Becky's side on this, but a lot of people do point out that probably there was an egg where something mutated and it became a chicken. The egg was from the...
But it wasn't a real egg, so the chicken came first?
Oh my God! This you don't see every day. This you don't see. I guess
someone was calling in my ear.
Yeah, that's going to be used.
I'm from Ohio.
Kind of like a anti commercial when you guys are running together.
Oh my God! It's Senator Rob Portman. You know what? It's
you want to?
Who says snooze button with you? You are on fire.
You want to hear the chicken laying the egg?
Yep.
We're going to save you.